There comes a moment in life when you stop proving yourself to people who were never willing to understand you. A moment when you realize that not every accusation deserves an answer, not every misunderstanding deserves your energy, and not every silence means weakness. Society teaches us to constantly explain ourselves, defend our choices, and seek approval from others. But true power begins the day you understand one thing: a queen never needs to explain her silence. Because confidence is not loud, strength is not always visible, and the most powerful people in the world know that silence often speaks far louder than words ever can. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about strength is believing that strong people are always loud. We grow up in a world that constantly teaches us that power means speaking first, defending yourself quickly, proving your worth to others, and making sure everyone understands your side of the story. From a young age, many people are conditioned to believe that silence means weakness, that staying quiet means surrender, and that if you are not constantly explaining yourself, people will assume you have something to hide. But the truth is often the exact opposite. Real strength is not found in how loudly you speak. Real strength is found in how calmly you carry yourself when the world expects a reaction from you. Think about the strongest people you have ever met in your life. They are rarely the ones trying to convince everyone around them that they are powerful. They are rarely the ones arguing endlessly, reacting emotionally to criticism, or seeking constant attention. Truly strong individuals possess something far more valuable than the need to be heard. They possess certainty within themselves. They know who they are, they understand what they stand for, and because of that, they do not feel pressured to explain every decision they make. When a person reaches that level of self-awareness, silence becomes one of their greatest strengths. The reason many people over-explain themselves is because deep inside, they are searching for validation. They want others to approve of their choices. They want people to understand their intentions. They want acceptance so badly that they begin handing out explanations to everyone around them, hoping someone will finally say, "I understand you." But confidence changes everything. The moment you truly know your worth, you stop depending on the opinions of other people to define your identity. You begin to realize that your peace is far too valuable to sacrifice simply because someone wants an explanation. There will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be critics who judge your choices without knowing your story. There will be moments when people question your decisions, challenge your motives, or create false assumptions about who you are. The natural instinct is to defend yourself immediately. Most people feel uncomfortable being misunderstood. But strong people understand something incredibly powerful. They understand that not everyone is meant to understand them. And more importantly, not everyone deserves access to their explanation. Silence requires emotional discipline. It takes tremendous strength to remain calm when someone provokes you. It takes maturity to walk away from unnecessary conflict instead of reacting impulsively. Anyone can shout when angry. Anyone can argue when challenged. But maintaining control over your emotions in difficult moments requires a different level of strength. That kind of control cannot be faked. It comes from deep confidence and an understanding that temporary emotions should never control permanent decisions. History repeatedly shows us that true power is often quiet. The most effective leaders are not always the loudest voices in the room. The strongest individuals understand that constantly reacting gives other people control over your emotional state. Every time you feel forced to defend yourself, you allow external opinions to dictate your inner peace. But the moment you stop reacting to everything around you, you reclaim your power. A queen understands this principle deeply. She knows her value is not determined by how well she can explain herself to those who doubt her. She understands that her dignity comes from self-respect, not public approval. She recognizes that silence can communicate confidence more effectively than endless words ever could. Sometimes silence says, "I know who I am." Sometimes silence says, "Your opinion does not control me." And sometimes silence simply says, "I refuse to waste my energy proving my worth to people who have already chosen not to see it." The strongest version of yourself emerges when you stop fighting for understanding from the true wrong people. Inner strength is built when you no longer feel the need to justify every choice, defend every action, or explain every silence. Because the truth is simple. The people who know exactly who they are do not spend their lives convincing others. They move forward with certainty, carrying a quiet confidence that no outside opinion can shake. That is real strength. That is power. And that is why silence is never weakness. Silence, when backed by confidence, becomes one of the greatest signs of inner strength a person can ever possess. One of the most important lessons a person can learn in life is understanding that you are not obligated to explain yourself to everyone who questions you. Many people spend years exhausting themselves trying to make others understand their choices, their intentions, their decisions, and the path they have chosen for their lives. We often feel pressured to defend ourselves because we fear being misunderstood. We worry about what people might think if we stay silent. We believe that if someone questions us, we owe them an answer. But maturity teaches a very different lesson. The truth is simple. Not everyone deserves an explanation, and protecting your peace sometimes means refusing to give one. The reality of life is that people do not always ask questions because they genuinely want to understand you. Sometimes people question you because they doubt you. Sometimes they challenge your decisions because they disagree with your growth. Sometimes they demand explanations not because they care, but because they want to feel a sense of control over your choices. This is where many people lose their energy. They assume that every challenge requires a response, that every criticism deserves defense, and that every misunderstanding must be corrected immediately. But wise people understand something powerful. Not every conversation is worth having. One of the greatest mistakes people make is giving unlimited access to their emotional energy. The moment someone questions your decisions, you feel the need to explain yourself in great detail. You begin justifying why you made certain choices. You spend time trying to prove that your intentions were pure. You search for the perfect words that will make someone understand your perspective. But what many fail to realize is that some people are not looking for understanding at all. They have already decided how they see you, and no explanation you offer will change their perspective. There are people who listen to understand, and there are people who listen only to judge. Learning to recognize the difference is one of the most valuable forms of emotional intelligence. When someone genuinely cares about you, communication matters. Honest conversations build trust, strengthen relationships, and resolve misunderstandings. But when people approach you with criticism rooted in jealousy, negativity, or the desire to control your choices, explaining yourself becomes a trap. You waste valuable energy trying to convince people who were never willing to see your truth in the first place. Confidence changes the way you handle these situations. Insecurity makes people feel responsible for managing everyone else's opinions. Confident people understand that they cannot control how others choose to interpret their actions. No matter how carefully you explain yourself, some people will still misunderstand you. No matter how honest your intentions are, some people will still judge you unfairly. The difference is that confident individuals stop allowing those judgments to determine their peace of mind. Think about how much time people lose trying to defend themselves. Entire days are spent replaying conversations, preparing explanations, and worrying about how others perceive them. Mental energy is consumed by the desire to fix opinions that may never change. But powerful individuals learn an important truth. You do not need permission to live according to your values. You do not need approval to make decisions that align with your purpose. And you certainly do not owe explanations to people who constantly question your worth. A queen understands this better than anyone. She recognizes that dignity means knowing when silence serves you better than words. She knows that constantly defending herself lowers her energy and shifts focus away from what truly matters. She understands that not everyone deserves access to her reasoning, her emotions, or her peace. Sometimes silence becomes a statement stronger than any explanation. It communicates confidence. It shows emotional discipline. It demonstrates that your self-worth is not dependent on external approval. The strongest people in life know when to speak and when to remain silent. They understand that explaining yourself should be reserved for people who genuinely matter, not for every critic who appears along the way. The moment you stop feeling responsible for satisfying everyone's curiosity, judgment, or criticism, you experience freedom. Real power begins when you realize that protecting your peace matters more than proving your point. Because in the end, not everyone deserves your explanation, and the people who truly value you rarely demand one. Many people grow up believing that power looks loud. We are taught to associate strength with the person who speaks the most, dominates conversations, demands attention, and makes sure their presence is impossible to ignore. Society often celebrates those who constantly prove themselves in public, those who aggressively defend their opinions, and those who make noise whenever they want to establish control. Because of this, many begin believing that if they want respect, they must constantly show people how strong they are. But one of the greatest truths about real power is that it rarely needs to announce itself. Real power is quiet. Real power is controlled. Real power exists in presence, not performance. If you study the most effective leaders, you begin to notice a pattern. The people who create the greatest impact are often not the loudest people in the room. They are not constantly seeking attention or trying to convince others of their importance. Instead, they possess something far more powerful than volume. They possess certainty. They know who they are, they know what they stand for, and because of that, they do not waste energy proving themselves every moment. Their confidence is not built on public approval. It comes from deep internal belief. This is something that thinkers like Simon Sinek have emphasized repeatedly in leadership and personal growth. Great leaders do not inspire people by controlling them through force or constant dominance. They inspire because people trust their consistency, their values, and their ability to remain calm under pressure. Leadership is not about speaking the loudest. It is about creating influence through authenticity. The strongest presence often belongs to the person who understands that silence can confidence better than endless words ever could. When people lack confidence internally, they often try to compensate externally. They interrupt conversations because they need their opinions to be heard. They argue aggressively because disagreement feels like a threat to their identity. They constantly seek validation because deep down they are uncertain about their own worth. This creates the illusion of power, but it is fragile. The louder a person becomes while trying to prove themselves, the more it often reveals insecurity hiding underneath. True power operates differently. It remains steady regardless of outside circumstances. A person who genuinely knows their value does not panic every time someone questions them. They do not react emotionally to every criticism thrown in their direction. They do not feel the need to fight every battle simply because someone challenges them. Instead, they remain composed. They understand that unnecessary reactions often give away control. The moment you become emotionally controlled by someone else's words, you surrender your power to them. There is tremendous strength in restraint. Imagine someone deliberately trying to provoke you, waiting for an emotional reaction, hoping to disturb your peace. Most people immediately react. They defend themselves, raise their voice, and allow frustration to take over. But a truly powerful person understands something deeper. The ability to stay calm when chaos surrounds you is one of the highest forms of strength a human being can develop. Remaining silent in moments of pressure is not weakness. It is evidence of self-mastery. A queen understands this naturally. She does not enter every room trying to prove her authority because her presence already speaks for itself. She does not waste time convincing people of her value because her confidence is not dependent on their recognition. She understands that dignity is preserved through control, not emotional reaction. Sometimes silence says more than arguments ever could. Silence communicates self-respect. It shows discipline. It demonstrates that your worth exists independently of other people's opinions. The world often mistakes noise for strength, but history repeatedly teaches a different lesson. The strongest individuals are often those who remain centered when others lose control. The most respected people are rarely the ones demanding attention every second. Their influence comes from consistency, integrity, and quiet confidence. Real power never needs constant advertisement. It does not beg for recognition. It does not chase validation. It simply exists with certainty. The moment you stop trying to prove your strength to the world, you begin becoming truly powerful. Because true confidence is not found in being the loudest voice around you. It is found in knowing that your presence alone carries enough strength that words become optional. Real power is quiet, and those who truly understand their worth never need to announce it. One of the most valuable things every person possesses in life is energy, yet it is often the very thing people give away too easily. Every single day, countless individuals drain themselves mentally and emotionally by constantly reacting to situations, defending their choices, explaining their intentions, and carrying the unnecessary weight of other people's opinions. Many do not realize that energy is limited. The way you spend your emotional energy determines the quality of your peace, your focus, and ultimately, the direction of your life. This is why learning to protect your energy is not selfish. It is one of the highest forms of self-respect a person can practice. Most people are careful about protecting material things. They protect their money, their possessions, and their time because they understand these things have value. Yet when it comes to emotional energy, many allow anyone access to it without hesitation. A negative comment can ruin an entire day. One person's criticism can trigger hours of overthinking. A misunderstanding can lead someone to spend endless time trying to explain themselves to people who were never interested in understanding them. Slowly, without noticing, people begin living in reaction mode, constantly responding to external pressure instead of directing their own lives with intention. The problem begins when people feel responsible for managing everyone else's cars, feelings, and perceptions. Someone questions your decision, and immediately you feel pressure to justify yourself. Someone misunderstands your actions, and you spend hours preparing explanations. Someone criticizes your progress, and suddenly your focus shifts away from your own goals toward defending your reputation. In these moments, you are not simply having conversations. You are giving away emotional energy that could have been invested into growth, creativity, discipline, and building the future you truly want. One of the strongest forms of maturity is learning that not every situation deserves access to your mind. There will always be negativity around you. There will always be people who judge your decisions, misunderstand your intentions, or project their own insecurities onto your life. If you respond emotionally to every challenge, you slowly allow the outside world to control your internal state. You begin living according to other people's reactions instead of your own purpose. Over time, this becomes exhausting because your peace becomes dependent on constantly fixing what other people think about you. People often misunderstand silence. They assume silence means surrender or weakness. In reality, silence can be a deliberate act of self-protection. Sometimes choosing not to engage is not avoidance. It is wisdom. There are moments where the strongest response is refusing to give your attention to things that do not deserve it. Every unnecessary argument steals focus. Every attempt to convince people who have already judged you steals emotional strength. Every moment spent defending yourself to the wrong audience drains energy that should be reserved for your own progress. Think about how many opportunities are lost because people waste energy fighting battles that never mattered. Hours disappear replaying negative conversations in your head. Days are consumed worrying about how others perceive you. Dreams get delayed because focus shifts away from growth and toward managing unnecessary conflict. But highly successful people understand something many overlook. Protecting your peace is essential for building a meaningful life. Energy directed toward growth creates results. Energy wasted on constant reaction creates exhaustion. A queen understands this principle deeply. She recognizes that her peace is precious and cannot be handed out freely to anyone demanding her attention. She knows that constantly explaining herself lowers her focus and weakens her emotional balance. She understands that every battle does not deserve participation. Sometimes the most powerful thing she can do is simply remain silent and move forward. Silence becomes a boundary. It says that not every opinion deserves entry into her mind. It communicates self-respect without needing explanation. When you begin valuing your emotional energy, your life changes dramatically. You stop reacting impulsively. You become more intentional about where your focus goes. You recognize that protecting your peace is not arrogance but responsibility. The strongest people understand that their greatest growth happens when their energy remains directed toward purpose instead of distraction. Self-respect begins the moment you understand that your mind deserves protection. Not everyone deserves access to your emotions. Not every criticism deserves your response. Not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation. Sometimes silence is the highest expression of wisdom because protecting your energy means protecting the very force that builds your future. And once you learn that, you stop giving pieces of yourself away to things that were never worth your attention in the first place. One of the greatest truths about life is that people will always pay more attention to what you do than to what you say. Words can be powerful, but words alone do not build trust, create respect, or prove character. Anyone can make promises. Anyone can speak with confidence. Anyone can explain their intentions in a way that sounds convincing. But in the end, it is action that reveals the truth. It is action that exposes discipline, commitment, and integrity. This is why one of the most powerful lessons a person can learn is understanding that your actions will always speak louder than your words. And often, the strongest response you can give the world is not explanation, but evidence. Many people spend too much of their lives trying to convince others through conversation. They feel the need to constantly explain who they are, what they are capable of, and why their decisions deserve respect. They argue when criticized, defend themselves when doubted, and repeatedly attempt to prove their worth through endless words. But there is a problem with living this way. The more energy you spend trying to convince people with language alone, the less energy you have available to actually build results. Talking creates temporary impressions, but action creates undeniable reality. Think about how often people make promises they never fulfill. Someone says they are committed to success, but their habits reveal inconsistency. Someone claims to value discipline, but their actions show distraction. Someone insists they are trustworthy, yet repeatedly breaks commitments when circumstances become difficult. This is why words can only carry value when backed by behavior. Human beings naturally learn to trust patterns, not promises. Over time, people stop listening to what someone says and begin observing what they consistently do. This principle applies to every area of life. In relationships, trust is not created because someone says they care. Trust is created through consistent behavior over time. In leadership, respect is not earned because someone declares authority. Respect is earned because people observe integrity in action. In personal growth, success is not achieved because someone talks endlessly about dreams. Success comes when discipline turns intention into consistent daily effort. Every meaningful achievement in life is built through action, not explanation. One reason people over-explain themselves is because they want immediate validation. They feel uncomfortable when others doubt them, so they begin defending their future before their future has even been built. Someone questions their potential, and immediately they start listing plans, goals, and intentions. But truly confident people think differently. They understand that there is no need to argue with doubt when results can answer far more powerfully than conversation ever could. Instead of proving themselves through words, they allow time, consistency, and action to become their response. This idea is deeply connected to emotional discipline. Every time you stop arguing and redirect that energy toward progress, you strengthen yourself. Instead of wasting time trying to make others believe in your vision, you invest that energy into building something undeniable. Eventually, success begins speaking on your behalf. Your growth becomes visible. Your discipline becomes impossible to ignore. Your results answer questions you no longer need to address personally. A queen understands this principle better than most people. She does not spend her life explaining her value to those who refuse to recognize it. She does not chase approval by trying to convince people through endless conversation. She understands that dignity is maintained when actions carry greater weight than words. Rather than arguing with criticism, she continues growing. Rather than defending herself against doubt, she allows consistency to build proof. Her confidence comes from knowing that reality always speaks louder than opinion. The world often rewards those who move with quiet discipline. The strongest individuals understand that explanations are temporary, but results leave permanent evidence. People may doubt your words, question your intentions, or criticize your plans. But once action produces undeniable results, arguments lose meaning. Success creates silence where criticism once existed. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself through endless conversation, your focus becomes sharper. You begin investing energy where it truly matters. You understand that words may introduce your intentions, but actions reveal your identity. In the end, people forget what you promised, but they remember what you built. And that is why true power comes when you stop speaking about what you will become and start becoming the person whose actions no longer require explanation. Because when your actions speak loudly enough, words become unnecessary. The highest level of confidence a person can ever develop is not the ability to speak boldly in front of others, impress people with intelligence, or convince the world of their worth. True confidence exists at a much deeper level. It begins the moment you stop allowing other people to determine how you see yourself. It is the quiet understanding that your value does not change simply because someone fails to recognize it. The strongest people in life are not those who constantly seek approval, attention, or validation. They are the ones who have built such deep self-belief that outside opinions no longer control their identity. This is the ultimate form of confidence, and it is where real freedom begins. Most people spend a large part of their lives unconsciously depending on external validation. From childhood, we are taught to measure ourselves through the reactions of others. Good grades bring praise. Success brings recognition. Compliments create temporary feelings of confidence. Social acceptance begins shaping self-worth. Over time, many people unknowingly build an identity that depends heavily on outside approval. They feel valuable when others appreciate them and feel insecure the moment criticism appears. Their confidence rises and falls based on how the world responds to them. The problem with living this way is simple. If your confidence depends on external approval, then your emotional stability will always remain in someone else's hands. The moment people disagree with you, doubt you, reject you, or misunderstand you, your sense of self begins to weaken. You start questioning your own decisions. You overanalyze conversations. You begin adjusting your behavior simply to avoid judgment. Slowly, your life stops being guided by your own values and becomes controlled by the fear of losing acceptance. This is not confidence. It is dependence disguised as confidence. Real self-belief is built differently. It comes from knowing yourself deeply enough that temporary opinions cannot shake your sides. It means understanding your strengths while accepting your flaws without allowing either to diminish one. It means recognizing that criticism does not automatically mean you are wrong. It means accepting that not everyone will support your choices, yet continuing forward with conviction because you trust your own judgment. One of the hardest lessons people must learn is understanding that approval is never guaranteed. No matter how kind you are, someone will misunderstand you. No matter how talented you become, someone will doubt your ability. No matter how honest your intentions are, someone may criticize your choices unfairly. Trying to satisfy everyone becomes an impossible burden because human opinions constantly change. If you spend your life chasing universal approval, you will lose yourself trying to become acceptable to everyone around you. This is why self-belief is so powerful. The moment you genuinely trust yourself, external validation becomes optional rather than necessary. Praise becomes appreciated but no longer defines you. Criticism becomes information instead of emotional destruction. Rejection stops feeling like proof of inadequacy and starts becoming part of growth. You stop performing for the world because your confidence is no longer built on audience reaction. Instead, it comes from an internal certainty that remains stable regardless of changing circumstances. A queen understands this principle at the deepest level. She knows her worth exists independently of whether others recognize it. She does not shrink herself simply because someone questions her value. She does not beg for understanding, chase approval, or sacrifice her identity to satisfy expectations placed upon her by others. Her confidence comes from knowing exactly who she is. Even when misunderstood, doubted, or criticized, she remains grounded because her self-worth was never built on public opinion in the first place. The strongest people in the world carry this kind of quiet confidence. They understand that their value is not something others can give or take away. It exists within them. They move through life with calm certainty because they trust themselves enough to keep moving forward even when others fail to understand their journey. The day you stop asking the world for permission to believe in yourself is the day your life begins to change. True confidence is not demanding attention. It is not proving yourself constantly. It is not forcing people to see your value. Real confidence is knowing that your worth remains unchanged no matter who doubts you. Because the highest level of power is reaching a point where you no longer need the world to confirm what you already know about yourself. And when that happens, your silence becomes stronger than anything words could ever say.